The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Don't you love it when things are both easier and more affordable? Like when the rain washes your car for you. Or like when you save up to 10% by bundling your renters and auto insurance with USAA. Bundle with USAA and start saving. Get a quote today.
Amateur Traveler, episode 902. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about forts and palaces, a hill station and tigers, Ghats, and the Taj Mahal as we return to India. This is Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler. Let's talk about India. I'd like to welcome back to the show Nur Ben Dov from Israel, who is coming to talk to us about India. Nur, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris, for having me here.
And I say welcome back. You've had to have been a long-time listener to listen to that episode. Nur came on and talked in 2013 about going to Victoria Falls, which I've had a pleasure to do since we did that show.
Yes, you did.
And where are we talking about today in India?
Okay, let's take this back to 2020. Susan, my wife, and I were planning on going to India in April of 2020. And as you can well imagine, we had our tickets and then we had to cancel it at the last minute. So that was the end of that trip. And as a result, we had to reschedule at the beginning of 2013. I like to purchase my tickets about a year in advance. You get relatively good rates on the one hand. On the other hand, it sets the stage of the dates of when you're going to be traveling. And from there on, it's just easy to fill in the plan later on. So we booked our trip back in the beginning of 2023 last year. And unfortunately, back in October, the Hamas terrorist group invaded parts of Israel, which threw a monkey wrench at this whole thing because all the airlines stopped flying here, including
Right.
Air India. The big advantage of using Air India is they fly directly into Delhi, quite a short flight, 5-6 hours, so that was convenient. And they stopped flying, but our plan was to fly in April. And April came about. We decided that if Air India comes back to fly here, we're going to use them. And they did come back in March, and our flight was in April, so that worked out great. On the return flight, there was the attack by Iran into Israel, so we couldn't fly Air India back to Israel, but we made a different plan. We flew via Dubai, and that was it. That takes care of the frame of why we decided to go to India. Air India is not an easy airline to work with. The big advantage is they fly nonstop into India. Not an easy. We had some refund issues with them. We're still working that out with them. Not a good airline to fly, whereas European or US airlines, when you cancel a flight, you usually get a good refund or a full refund, especially if they do. With us, we're still fighting with them, but we'll get it in the end. That's the background.
Back to my question, where did you go in India?
Okay, we started off in Delhi and we did the Golden Triangle. We started off in Delhi. After Delhi, we went to Agra, and then we went to Pushkar and Jaipur, and back to Delhi, and then we flew to Varanasi. And after Varanasi, we went to Dharamshala up in the mountains, came back to Delhi, and flew back to Israel from there.
Okay.
I would like to cover a couple of things. Arriving into Delhi, I think you also flew into Delhi when you came in, right?
I did. We
Okay.
flew in coincidentally when they were having some of their worst air quality ever.
Okay.
And so just after we flew in, United that we had flown in on stopped flying in there because they thought it was a health threat to their crews. That's how bad it was.
Okay. We flew into Delhi, and a couple of recommendations before you fly or when you arrive. Uber is very commonly used in India, very easy
Hmm.
to use. They have their own version of Uber, which is called Ola, OLA, and they both work well. But make sure that you don't get trapped by somebody who picks you up right as you arrive. They wave a smartphone in front of you showing you that they have Uber, but they're not the real Uber. You need to follow the Uber sign, the Uber pickup points, and that's where you go. Uber or Ola or whatever you take. Another suggestion, recommendation is to use an eSIM program, which is what I used. Unfortunately, I only found out when I got there that the Indian government is afraid or doesn't like these eSIM solutions. As a
Hmm.
result, it took me about 2 days to sort it out by email support and so on. The Indian government is concerned that the eSIMs are being used by criminals of sorts, and as a result, they do not really allow for them. So, if you do decide to use the eSIM solution, such as Airaloo or any other system, make sure you load it onto your phone before you get there, because when you get there,
Okay.
it just simply doesn't work.
And for people who are not familiar with eSIMs, which I've switched to in the last couple of years also, you basically, instead of having to use that paper clip to get the little chip, the SIM
Right.
card out of your phone, you have a virtual SIM card. And so
Correct.
you can have multiple lines active on your phone at the same time, one that can be a local line. And if you do that, you have to have a modern phone to do it. It has to be a phone built in the last couple of years or so.
And it works great when it works.
Exactly.
Highly recommended. Another issue is that you would need cash. India is a very much a cash society. You would
Hmm.
need cash. So we changed money at the airport. Exchange rate was not great, but you do need cash. If we start our tour of India,
Before we start our tour, why should someone go to India? You've gone through a lot of hoops here to get there. Why India?
okay, I'll give you my reason for going into India. I've gone to India many times over the past 20, 25 years, and it's a place that I've grown to love and love to hate. It's a strange place. It's a place with its own character, not for everyone, but a very intriguing place. Not easy, but a great place to visit. And always having gone always on business, it's very different. So I decided this time to take my wife because I know that traveling with my wife, it just has a completely different flair to it. And that's
Mhm.
the reason I chose to go. Especially that I know my wife likes the colors, the very bright colors and the chaos in India.
That's why I didn't take my wife. Is the chaos is not the thing that she likes, but it is that it is colorful, it is
It is
vibrant,
very
it is
vibrant,
chaotic.
chaotic, but I think it's an organized chaos. That's my
Hmm.
opinion.
Hmm.
And as to taking your wife, I would recommend what my wife says. My wife Susan says that she doesn't mind being in the schmutz, in the places that are not so clean, as long as in the evening you come back to a very clean bed and a very clean hotel room, which is what we did. So
Okay.
once you accept that as a prerequisite, you can really enjoy India. It's a very different place. We landed in Delhi, and Delhi is, I think, is quite a shock to your system when you land there. The honking of the horns, the heat, I just, I have a saying that between two auto rickshaws, there's always a place for another one to fit in between, right? There's no rules for the road, and but you get there, and we took an Uber to the hotel, and that worked out great. But you generally don't want to do much traveling the first day because you arrive generally after a long flight. If you arrive from Europe or if you arrive from the
Hmm.
US, you do want to rest a little bit. We went to a place, to a central location called CP, Connaught Place, which is in
Hmm.
the center of Delhi. A very commercial place, chaotic, mainly a marketplace. I like it, but it's not for everyone. Connaught is a famous British person, English person, that his name is also found in Hong Kong and in other places. So he made a mark on the British while they stayed over there. We didn't stay much in Delhi. The next day, we had a car and a driver, and we went to Agra. And Agra is where the Taj Mahal is. A must for everyone. It's one of those touristy places. One of
Mm-hmm.
those things you have to see. Amazing structure, lots of history behind it, the Mughals and whatever. But before we went to the Taj Mahal, we went before that to the Agra fort. And the guide that we had told us that if you go to the Agra fort, you really don't need to go to the Red Fort in Delhi because the Agra fort is more impressive, which it probably is because I've been to both. So you can do that. The last day we had in Delhi as well, but it's up to what you want to do in Delhi. So we did the Agra fort and the Taj Mahal on the first day that we arrived there in the afternoon. And that was enough. You see the main location. And like I said, the Taj Mahal is very impressive. It's worthwhile. But the next day, we already left.
Well, I'm going to slow you down here a little bit, in part because we've got plenty of time. So the Agra Fort, I actually haven't seen. We were supposed to go to the Agra Fort and then to the
Right.
Taj Mahal. And if you go back and listen to the episode of the Amateur Traveler Trip to India, we got trapped on the slow train to Agra from
Okay.
Varanasi.
Okay.
And so we arrived hours late. So tell me a little more about the Agra Fort. So, great big brick fort
Right.
built in the 1500s, as I recall.
Correct. Yes.
What else can you tell me about visiting it?
It's like many of the Indian forts, great view. It's on the riverfront. There's a river in front of it. And
Hmm.
there's a good view of Taj Mahal from the fort as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The idea, I think, was that the king or whoever, or the Mughal was there, he was able to see the Taj Mahal as well, which he built for one of his favorite wives, of course.
Okay. Got it.
So
And,
that, so
and the Taj Mahal is one of those things that always seems like there's so much high expectations that it seems like it's going to be disappointing. I know that wasn't my experience. I did enjoy seeing the Taj Mahal, although very plain on the inside, interestingly enough, when it's amazing on the outside. What were your impressions? You've seen it before.
no, that was my actually my first time.
Oh, your first time? Okay.
That was my first time. It was impressive. It was not very colorful. It was
Hmm.
impressive. The grounds around it were very well kept. Impressive, I would say. Not awe-inspiring, definitely not. But I can understand and appreciate the architecture and the view, and basically the amount of money that was spent on putting all this together. There was a lot of affluence over there with the people that could put such a structure together. I think it took a couple of dozen years to put it all together, but it's impressive, very impressive.
Hmm. You say not so colorful. We actually went at dusk, and so
Okay.
we got to see it as the light faded and had a little more of a rose tint because of that. And I think that was intentional, seeing it when it took on those colors of the sunset.
We were not there that late, so we did not see that, the
Hmm.
changing of the colors. But impressive all the same. Amazing that place is kept clean. Outside the gates,
Yeah,
outside the area is just not as clean as you would like it to be.
right.
But by the way, our travel agent is an old school type of a travel agent. Is
Hmm.
Indian. He lives in Agrawal, in Agra, and he operates out of. We were able to connect with him, and he was very very good. Always available on WhatsApp and whatever. There is something to be said for having a local person who can give you ideas of places to see. Not to say that there are not people outside of India who can give you good suggestions, but it's convenient to have somebody local to help you out. And if anybody wants to, I'll definitely share his name and details if somebody's interested. But it's
Well,
convenient.
and you mentioned you're a travel agent. Unlike me, where I was on a tour, an organized
Yeah.
tour, it was an amateur traveler trip, organized to the extent that I could be organized. But you were there traveling independently.
Yes, it was just myself and my wife.
And so, did you
So
drive to Agra? Did you take the train?
he took care of all our travel plans except for the flights. The flights
Okay.
I've booked online because India's got a lot of low cost airlines that are very well operated and very easy to work with online. So there's
Oh, so
Indigo,
you
there's
flew from Delhi to Agra?
no, we drove, but other domestic portions of our travel, like
Got it. Okay.
from Delhi to Varanasi, we flew, and some other domestic flights we did. The rest, this travel agent organized a driver and a guide for us wherever we needed one.
Got it. Okay.
We also took.
Can I ask how expensive that was for a guide and a driver for a day?
I'll tell you in a minute the prices. The convenience of having a driver with you is
Hmm.
that he waits for you. You travel at your own pace. A driver in India is roughly about $100 for a car and driver, and you don't have to worry about his hotel
Hmm.
accommodation because the hotel where you stay takes care of him or he takes care of himself. The convenience, because nobody, I wouldn't say nobody, I wouldn't want to drive in India. I'm sure you wouldn't either.
No, certainly it depends where you are. If you're out in the countryside, it wouldn't have been a problem at all. But you mentioned the honking of horns in New Delhi. I remember literally lying in bed at night, wondering how long I could go without hearing a horn honk, and it was 6 seconds. Was
That
the
was long.
longest I was able to hear. So it's a little chaotic.
It's very chaotic. I wouldn't even drive in the countryside because we were driving on the highway,
Yeah.
for example, from Jaipur to Delhi. And that's one of the big highways between
Hmm.
Mumbai and Delhi. And all of a sudden, there was a car coming
Oh my.
opposite our direction on the main highway. It's a toll highway, and the truck comes facing you. It's just unbelievable. There's no law and order over there. So I wouldn't drive in India.
Ah bon chien. Bonjour, je suis Theo, a tour leader with Explore, and this is Punti. He's helping us find truffles under the trees next to this beautiful vineyard. Maybe for tomorrow's cooking class? Oui, call is semi-on heure. Parfait. Semi-on o'clock. Not everyone gets to enjoy a Bordeaux sunset this way, but you will if you explore. No, Punti. Search exploreworldwide.com and don't just travel. Explore.
This episode is brought to you by Peloton. If you're looking for flexible workouts, Peloton's got you covered. Summer runs or playoff season meditations. Whatever your vibe, Peloton has thousands of classes built to push you and has something there to adapt with you whether you need a challenge or rest. Peloton has everything you need whenever you need it. Find your push. Find your power. Peloton. Visit onepeloton.com.
I would say, to answer your question, like I said, when it came to hotels, we only took five-star hotels, and that's in the range of $100 for bed and breakfast for the two of us, which is
Hmm.
very reasonable, I think, because you need a clean bed at the end of the day. Because you can stay in a guest house in India for $3 or $4 a night, which is not what I wanted to do.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think we were
no,
probably at 3-star hotels, which was still a clean bed, but not quite the
not
same
the same.
level of. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm saying that for about 200 and some and change, you can really live very comfortably in India.
Okay.
And because it was a car and driver, not a bus and a driver, I think it's very much the same price as organized tour that you semi-organized tour like the amateur traveler tour that you did or whatever. I would say the advantage of doing it, we are not organized tour type of people, but some
Hmm.
people enjoy that. We like to be dropped off and travel at our own pace. And when
Hmm.
we finish and this driver sits there, it's just a convenience. It's a convenience, but some
Sure.
people don't like to do any planning. So the organizer organizes it and they just come for the ride. It's different strokes for different
Yeah,
people.
ours was about half the cost of that, at least half, maybe even less than that. But obviously, we had the inconvenience of doing the long train rides. We had the missed at least one thing. Great guide though, who was able to tell us so much. So it was a great trip, but it was a little more roughing it than what you're talking about.
Yeah. And the difference between what they call a big SUV, the Toyota
Yeah, yeah.
Innova, or a little sedan, what they call, is like $30 a day. So it just doesn't make sense not to ride in comfort. And especially, we were there at the beginning of summer and it was getting hot already. So you
Okay.
want the convenience. So after Agra, we went to an interesting fort on the way to Ranthambore. That was a suggestion of our travel agents, which was very worthwhile. Ranthambore, and I'll give you the spelling in a minute. Ranthambore is a nature reserve just west of Agra, and they have real tigers living in nature there, and that we went to see. But on the way, we went to a fort, and the fort is Fatehpur Sikri. That's spelled Fatehpur. Second word, Sikri, Sikri. Again, I'll leave the history to you because you're the history buff. But it's the usual case of a Mughal king who had a couple of wives. One was a political wife to make everybody happy. One was the wife that he really loved, and she had the bigger part of the fort, and so on and so forth. And the stories are somewhat similar in the different forts. Like I said, I enjoy the stories while I hear them. Definitely, I don't remember those stories afterwards. But in that area, the Mughals had a big say and impression on the history of the places. Like the Taj Mahal was also Mughals, and this
Right.
this fort is also definitely worthwhile. Halfway between there and Ranthambore, where we had the safari.
And I don't know the particular history of Fatehpur Sikri, but if people are interested in, you had breezed through Delhi. There is a lot to see there if you're interested in the history of that. And I've got a post that I'll link in the show notes of all the different historic sites that we went to and kind of which era of history as various waves of conquerors and dynasties and such happened here in northern India. So I'll put a
Correct.
link to that in the show
Yeah.
notes.
People must remember that India is a huge country, and
Right.
it's actually a lot bigger than it is because not so much the distance as much as the infrastructure is not that great. And in some places, when you travel in between cities, you even if you travel by car, you can go down to speeds of 20, 30 miles an hour, and you actually measure distance in time. And in a whole day, you might do 100, 150 miles or so. And that's it because it just the infrastructure is not there. Some places it is much better, some places it is not. But India is very big, but no doubt about that. That day after we saw the fort, we arrived in Ranthambore, and I will spell that. It's Ranthambore. Yeah, is an area, is a city, and there's a big park over there,
Mm-hmm.
and you can go into that park two ways. There is something that they call the canter. Canter is basically, think of it as a mid-sized truck with places for maybe 20 people sitting on the back of it. It's an
Okay.
open truck, somewhat similar to the African safari trucks, but
Mm-hmm.
a little bit bigger. So you've got the two options. You can go on this canter, which we chose, or they have the gypsy. Gypsy is basically a small Suzuki SUV. And the small Suzuki SUV, you've got a driver, you've got a guide, and you've got places for maybe two people in the back. And they zoom around a little bit quicker than what the canter does. The advantage of a canter is that you're sitting higher, but you're sitting with a lot of people. I think that
Okay.
was a better choice, and I'll send you some pictures of that. We were actually very lucky. We did see a tiger, and some people don't know, but a tiger is way bigger than a lion.
Right.
Tiger
Right.
is a
Because
big, big animal, and that's their natural environment over there. And we were able to see actually a female tiger with about three cubs, which was quite amazing, quite unusual, very difficult. They're quite evasive. Lucky for us, when we were there, it was the dry season, so the grass was not that high, and we were able to observe some of the tigers. We went on a morning drive, and it gets very hot, so we went back to the hotel to rest for a couple of hours, and then we went for an afternoon drive. So the canter comes by the hotel, picks you up, takes you for a couple of hours. You go into the park, you come out, you go and rest, and then you go in the evening. And then it's a matter of luck. You may or may not see what you got to see.
well, I
Uh,
was seeing that the whole reserve is about 515 square miles or 1,300 square kilometers, and they've got about 80 tigers. You
that's
could work out the math here for the density of tigers is not that dense.
not
There's going to be
correct.
some luck involved.
Yes, there was some luck, and we were actually very lucky.
Hmm.
Also, there's some deer and lots of peacocks, and you hear them all the time, and monkeys. But the main animals to see out there are the tigers. And they call the spotted deer. Those deer that they have over there are spotted deer. And then we went on to Rajasthan. That's where you start seeing the very colorful saris that the ladies wear over there, very bright, colorful saris. We wanted to have more of a Rajasthan experience, although I wouldn't recommend anybody to go there in the summer because in the summer it's desert basically, and the
Right.
temperatures get very high, very uncomfortable. We were there; it was still good, but we wanted the experience, so we went to both Pushkar and Jaipur. Pushkar is somewhat of a holy city Almost every city in India has some holiness to it, but Pushkar is the city for Lord Brahma. And I will not go into the Indian gods, it gets very complicated, the Hindi gods. But Brahma is, I think, the Lord of the earth or something like that. And there's a big temple for Lord Brahma over there. A very pretty, very picturesque little town, I would say. There's a lake in the middle, and the city is built around the lake, and it's got lots of ghats. Ghats, Ghats. Ghats are the
Hmm.
places that people go down to
Yeah.
bathe and soak in the water for religious reasons. Definitely worth a day's visit to Pushkar.
And Pushkar, as I'm seeing, versus you're going to go to Varanasi later on, which I've been to. Pushkar is only 21,000 people, so it be very small for an Indian city.
Very small,
Uh,
yeah,
would have a very different feel, I would assume, than Jaipur, for instance, which is a
of
bigger
course.
city.
Yes, definitely. A very small city. You can walk around the lake, and you've done most of what there is to see over there.
Hmm.
The ghats, the temples, and we took a guide over there who took us around and showed us. Although we did the afternoon we arrived, we went for a walk on our own, and basically we saw most of what the guide took us there for the next day. The big difference is that he showed us some different places and explained to us the different things about the city. It's nice to have a local guide
Oh,
to give
absolutely.
you the local flair of what's going on.
Hmm.
So that was Pushkar, and basically the same driver that took us from Agra to Ranthambore to Pushkar continued with us to Jaipur and Delhi. So we took a driver for the couple of days, and that was
Okay.
convenient. And he's there waiting for you whenever you need to or wherever you want to go to. It's just a convenience. We try to select wherever we can hotels that have got an Indian flair to them with Indian architecture. You can always find hotels that are Western, more Western type with no
Right.
Indian. But this one had the electrical outlets were like British from, I would say, 1920s, 1930s. And the air conditioner was somewhat old. It just had a nice feel to it. There was carving all the inside the room. There was stone carving and drawings and murals, and it was beautiful, very Indian. So we enjoyed it, but it's whatever you might like. And again, food was very good at this hotel as well.
Hmm.
So after Pushkar, we went on to Jaipur, and Jaipur is the pink city. It's called the pink city. It's not that pink. Old Jaipur and there's a new Jaipur, but
Hmm.
definitely worth a visit. It's got another fort. It's called the Ember Fort
Hmm.
on the mountain. Again, worth a visit to these forts.
And when you say fort, it's a fort and a palace. So
Yeah,
when you
it's
get
the Ember
inside,
Palace, right?
that it's good to be the Raja.
Yeah, yes, it's you had a good life. I think that they really had a good life at the time, but it's impressive how they were able to build all
Hmm.
these forts, all these palaces. And definitely there was one side of the palace that was used in the winter, one side was used in the summer, according to the prevailing winds and the temperatures and so on. And in some of these palaces, the women or the wives were not allowed to be in public, so they were able to watch what's going on outside through very special windows that they have on those palaces and so on. But definitely worth a visit. Because we had some time, we were taken to a very expensive hotel in Jaipur. I just don't remember the name, but the guide took us to visit the place at $1,000 a night. It's not the type of hotel I would stay at, but it just shows you the extremes that you see in India, from people who earn a couple of dollars a day to people who can spend $1,000 a day for a hotel. Just amazing, the differences. Also in Jaipur, they have an astronomy observatory that they maintain quite well.
Hmm.
Worthwhile, nothing earth shattering, but interesting to see, especially if the sun is out. You can see how they were able to tell the time in different ways of doing that.
Yeah, talking about Jantar Mentar.
Right,
Hmm.
exactly.
But it was very important, not even so much telling the time, but it was used for not just astronomy, but really a lot of it for astrology, in the
Right.
sense that you wouldn't make a big decision without knowing your forecast for the day or whatever.
To this day, astrology is very much a part of
Hmm.
the Indian culture. You don't get married until the stars are aligned the way they should be. So it's very much a part of Indian life. From Jaipur, we decided to leave very early in the morning because we had about 2 o'clock flight out of Delhi. There's no flights out of Jaipur into Varanasi. So the
Okay.
driver took us, it was about a 4 hour drive, 4 or 5 hour drive to Delhi airport. And from there we flew to Varanasi. Again, the advantage of having a driver is that he would stop for us to eat somewhere in a restaurant that would be safe.
Hmm.
And one thing I must say, we were in India for 2 weeks, and this is a good opportunity to mention that. We didn't have the Delhi belly, we didn't have the Bombay belly. Most people do not survive without some kind of a stomach ailment or whatever, but we were able to survive. And we did that by just being very careful, drinking only bottled water,
Hmm.
including brushing our teeth with bottled water, not eating out, being very careful where we eat, and no street food. We ate in the hotel. And we were lucky because we had a bag full of medications in case, but luckily we didn't need them.
We took a group of 10 people there, ate street food, did the bottled water, stopped along the side of the road when our guide would see they were making some fritters or something like that, and would go pick those up in yesterday's newspaper, and we still didn't get sick. So,
Oh, so lucky.
part of the thing is with street food, you want to have something that you can see that it's boiled or broiled or that is cooked. What's the phrase? Boil it, peel it, bake it, or forget it.
Yeah. True, but if you eat something that's been broiled or deep fried for a whole day in the same oil, you just never know whether our stomach is able to handle that. Like you say, you may or may not, because I've heard of people that have had,
Yeah, the water, I think, is a really important thing.
yeah. And also ice. Avoid ice.
Yes, exactly.
Some people forget that you avoid ice. But I must say that over the 20 some years that I've been going to India, I think the place has changed a little bit. And maybe that's part of it. I hope at least it is. We got to the Delhi airport and we flew to Varanasi. We flew Indigo. I don't know if you guys used their services.
No.
Indigo is a low cost airline, very efficient, and it works well. And while you're on the flight, they try to sell you all sorts of things, a couple of dollars here or there to get water or to get some of their food, snacks. But that's fine. We didn't take that. But very successful. They have a very large fleet of A320 series aircraft. Very interesting operation.
The wrongs we must right. The fights we must win. The future we must secure together for our nation. This is what's in front of us. This determines what's next for all of us. We are Marines. We were made for this.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/MBO. Terms and conditions apply.
So we flew to Varanasi with them. We arrived in Varanasi in the afternoon, and then we went to the river to watch the evening prayers and chanting and whatever. Very impressive. And you see some of the people really get into the vibe of it, and they really are serious about it. Very impressive. Walking up to the riverfront, filthy dirty, walking through the market. But then we sat on the rooftop, which was arranged for us to watch the happening with the fire and the chanting. Very interesting, very impressive.
We should describe it a little more here when you talk about the fire and the chanting. So you're talking about something like 7 different Hindu, and I don't know if priest is the right term,
Yes, priests
with various censers with fire in them, swinging them over their heads.
correct.
So there's smoke and fire and noise, and it is a spectacle.
Yes, and lots of ringing bells and lots of petals that they throw on those.
Right. And then
different
stacks
colors.
of fire and, quite a lot.
Yes.
I have quite a few pictures from our trip that I'll link in the show notes to an article on Varanasi. But yeah,
I have a couple and I can give them to you as well.
Colorful,
Very
amazingly intricate city.
Yeah. Yes, very, very interesting. And then the next morning you wake up early for the sunrise chanting and welcoming the sun in the morning over the river. Again, very impressive, very worthwhile. Then you go and have breakfast, and then you go for a ride. Went on the boat before, and then you go and have breakfast. But you go on the boat after the chanting in the morning. We went on the boat looking at the ghats. Again, very impressive. I'm not a very spiritual person, far from it, but there is something there. I don't know what you felt about Varanasi, but there is something in the air over there. I don't know what it is. It's you feel something, and whatever it is for different people, different strokes for different people.
And for me, it was quite interesting because you have, I don't know, 20 ghats or something like that. And when we say ghats, they're steps going down into
Right,
the river,
right,
or the other town you talked about doing down into the lake. And on those steps, people are doing ritual bathing. And so you have people who are in quite colorful outfits or who are wearing different paint on their faces or whatever. And then you
right.
also have the other two ghats where they're cremating bodies. And we passed by a bot where they were filming a Bollywood movie. So it was just a spectacle of a scene. And in the early light of the morning, very picturesque. I just
Correct.
couldn't get enough as a
Yeah.
photographer.
Yeah, that's definitely that. We were also lucky we were there. There's a monastery of young boys actually,
Hmm.
and they were chanting as well. We heard that the chanting of the boys, and lucky or not lucky for us, the ghat for the cremating people, there was no cremation at the time. I don't know if we were lucky or not, but there was no cremation. But we did see the wood that's being stacked there, waiting for somebody to be cremated. From what I hear, they say that to cremate a body, you need 300 kilograms of wood. That's about
Hmm.
600 pounds worth of wood. And the cast of the people who do the cremation are walking around there picking whatever is left over. Interesting, very interesting.
Yeah, they were cremating bodies when we were there. You'll find none of that in my pictures. It's not appropriate to take pictures of it. Our guide informed us. Not sure I would have anyway. A very odd scene. We were up at a lassi shop one point that was up the hill from the cremation ghat, and we were just there eating our lassis, and every few minutes, some procession of people would process through the streets crying out to Shiva and carrying a body just covered in a shroud down through the streets to get down there. So it's a scene.
Yeah, it's
it when
definitely
you're in Varanasi, you're nowhere else.
exactly. I would agree to that. I think they have some kind of a tradition that if you're in mourning, you shave your head or something like that. That's part of,
Hmm.
and that's one way of knowing that somebody has lost a dear, a family member or something. But that's part of the tradition as well.
Hmm. I don't know that. Okay.
Yeah, there is something about that. So then, after the boat ride, then a walk through the old city of Varanasi, we went back to the hotel. We had breakfast because it takes a couple of hours in the morning. And then we also went to the Varanasi University, a huge place. I think they've got a couple of thousand people just working there just to maintain the grounds. It's a huge place, definitely worthwhile. And they've got a temple inside as well. Then the next day, we left Varanasi and we went to visit a friend of mine, an Indian friend of mine in Chandigarh. Chandigarh is a couple of hours drive north of Delhi, but we flew from Varanasi to with a connection in Lucknow.
Okay.
Lucknow is on the way, and we went to Chandigarh. Chandigarh is a very interesting city. It's a very new city, about 50 years old. Chandigarh is spelled with an H in the end.
Hmm.
And we spent some time with my friend over there. And then from there, we took a car and driver, which my friend organized for me in this particular case, who took us from Chandigarh to Dharamshala. Dharamshala is a city in the north on the mountains already, where it's not as hot as it is in the lower places. When the time of the British, they used to call them the mountain stations. That was the
The hill
British
stations.
way,
Yeah.
yeah, the hill stations, right?
Hmm.
And Dharamshala is very close to where the Dalai Lama is now in McLeod-Ganj. There's a city where when the Dalai Lama was, I don't know if he expelled or ran away from Tibet by the Chinese, the Indian government welcomed them and they basically built a whole center in that part of the world. Very interesting. You feel the influence of these Buddhists, which is actually, this is where I learned the difference between Buddhism and Hinduism. But the Dalai Lama and the Tibetans, they are Buddhists, they're not Hindus.
In Varanasi, obviously, it's very much a Hindu holy city.
Exactly, definitely. We spent 3 days there resting a little bit, and that's very impressive over there because you start seeing the Himalayas, or as the Indians say, Himalayas. You start seeing the mountains and you see the snow-capped mountains.
Hmm.
Very pretty, a very hilly place, but over there we enjoyed. We had a great time. We rested there as well. Interesting again for the independent traveler, what worked out just in terms of pricing for people to consider. When we walked into the hotel, they had a tour of about 12 different places that are worthwhile visiting in the Dharamshala area. And that
Hmm.
was 3,500 rupees. And that's what, just over $30 per person per day. It's a whole day tour. The exchange rate for the rupees now is about 83, 84 rupees to the dollar. So we said we might take that, but at the same time, that same day, we asked the hotel to arrange for us for a taxi driver to take us to the market in Dharamshala, which they found. So I started talking to the driver and I said, okay, next day, will you take us there? He said, well, it will be 300 rupees. So then further discussion with him, I said, what would be for half a day? In the end, he said, okay, 2,000 rupees for the whole day. So he took us to those 12 locations that the hotel would charge 3,500 rupees. And here we had a taxi driver, a cab driver, taking us for the day for a third of what it would have cost us with an organized tour. It just so happened that it worked out for us. And then we went to the Tibetan monasteries. We went to all the places that are worthwhile visiting there. And you do it at your own pace, and he waits for you. And when you finish, you come out, and he's waiting for you. You're not rushed by a certain time schedule. Over there was another fort. I'll remember the name of the fort. Fort over there, Kangra Fort. Kangra Fort is also the name of the airport next to Dharamshala, which we used to fly back to Delhi. Kangra Fort, again, a very impressive fort. We went on our own over there. As we came out, there was a guy that was making orange juice. So we said, okay, we'll give it a try. He was ready to put ice in the. I stopped him right at the last minute, and he didn't put ice in the orange juice, and the orange juice was good. So we went to a couple of interesting locations over there. There's also interesting, there's an Anglican church right in the middle of the cedar trees. Above a certain altitude, there's a cedar trees, a very old, I think it was built in the 1860s or something. Interesting Anglican church dedicated to the governor of India at the time. Again, interesting. And the last day there, I went on a track going up the mountain, worthwhile. It's called the Triund, Triund, and I'll send you some pictures of the track. It takes about 3-4 hours to go up the mountain, and then all of a sudden the Himalayan range appears just in front of you. It's just amazing, worthwhile. But I took a guide with me. Actually, the taxi driver was also a guide, so
Okay.
he did both. He walked with me. You can't do it on your own, but I'd recommend if anything goes wrong, you better have somebody with you. So it's definitely worthwhile doing that. While I was doing that, my wife decided to do some cooking classes over there, and she learned how to do some Indian cooking, which was very nice. So when I got back, I had my afternoon lunch of something that day. And that was that.
Excellent.
And then the last day, the same taxi driver also took us to the airport. Very convenient as well. So basically, we took him for 2-3 days to accompany us. We got back to Delhi and we had to shorten our trip by 2 days because of the flights available, because Air India did cancel our flights back to Tel Aviv. So we had to take a different flight. We flew with Fly Dubai to Tel Aviv. So we had to shorten our trip by about 2 days. But that worked out okay. And
Excellent.
that was the grand tour of India that we did. I think we would be going back there sometime again.
One of the things I enjoy about doing this show is getting on people, even sometimes like this for the same destination. We've talked about some of these destinations before, but looking at it from a different point of view. And we've got
Yeah.
other episodes on India. We've got a whole episode on Rajasthan, for instance, with somebody from India. So obviously a very different point of view. It's something that I enjoy doing. But as we go to wrap this up, anything else that people need to know before they book their flight to India?
I think the main issue is don't be afraid to go on your own if that's what you choose to do. Get a local travel agent that I can recommend, or get a US or a European-based travel agent.
Okay.
They'll take good care of you. I think it's not as difficult as it used to be. So, yeah, go for it. And there are places that you can actually have just a vacation, a resting vacation. But India is so chaotic and so spiritual and vibrant and difficult that it's just amazing, and it's definitely worth it. You can do a combination of everything in one place.
Excellent. As we go to wrap this up, you were standing in the prettiest spot you saw in India. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
I'll give you two things. For me, walking up that, try and walk
Up
up
there in the foot of the
up
Himalayas.
up in Dharamshala area. I walked up about, I reckon, 3-4 hours, and all of a sudden trees open up and you reach an area between the mountains. All of a sudden the Himalaya opens up in front of you out of nowhere, and that's just amazing. You see the next range, you're right in front of the Himalayas, and to me that was amazing. I'll send you a picture of that. And for my wife, I think the Taj Mahal was one of the highlights. It's, like you said, different perspectives, different ways of seeing things. Yeah. So those are the two places for us.
And one thing that makes you laugh and say, only in India.
I think everything and anything, but I think driving. You have a car coming right up in front of you, and just the last minute they swing out of the way. Of course, to the left, they're still in good British tradition. They drive to the left. Actually, I have another good one that I want to tell you. That's wanted to make me laugh. Was at the hotel in Dharamshala. They had what they called Indian Anglo food feast. They call it Anglo.
Okay.
Now, I know what the Indian feast is. What does the English? No offense to any of your British listeners, but what do the British have to offer compared to the Indian food? It's beyond me. But that was a strange one as well.
I will admit my favorite food in England is Indian, so I'm not sure.
I agree.
Excellent. And if you had to summarize India in just 3 words, what 3 words would you pick?
I've picked it up as well. I think, if you allow me, organized chaos.
Okay.
That's 2 words, but
we're going to hyphenate that one. Okay.
We can hyphenate that, or can just call it chaos. Colorful and spiritual. I think spiritual, very spiritual, a very, very spiritual place. Yes.
Excellent. Our guest again has been Nur Ben Dov from Israel. And Nur, thanks so much for coming back on the show. This, 11 years later, and talking about your love for India.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
Thanks again to the patrons of the show who help support Amateur Traveler financially. As I mentioned, I'm retired now to Amateur Traveler, so this is my full-time job. If you're interested in becoming a patron of the show or learning what it entails, go to patreon.com/amateurtraveler. I got an email from Steve. It's a longer letter, so I'll only read parts of it. My wife and I are both 78, and we still love travel. We started our honeymoon 1968 in Canada. We spent every summer traveling in the U.S. We started really spending time abroad in the late 70s. We started out with weekend cruises from Los Angeles to Mexico. That extended to longer cruises as I got more vacation time with my employer. Cruises then combined days at sea and a day in various ports. We've expanded on that now to take trips that go all over continents via train and airplane, along with cruises, and spend multiple days in port with a wide variety of offshore adventures. We've even been to Antarctica. Well, Steve, I have not been to Antarctica, so I'm a little jealous there. And then leading up to, I think your challenge is to create podcasts and articles that have information for young travelers and information for older travelers. The length of the trip can be much longer for us older travelers. Older travelers have many interests, and we really like talking to others and learning new things. And I responded to Steve, but one of the reasons that I do a 1-week itinerary on the show is, in fact, that most people who are still in their working years have less vacation time, and that 1 week fits easier into a schedule for an American traveler especially. But the other reason I do it is that a 1-week itinerary tends to fit into about a 45-minute show. And so what I expect people do, and I hear from people they do, is they combine multiple shows. If they've got a 3-week trip, you could either travel slower than we do sometimes, and that is appropriate because sometimes we're doing things at a pretty fast clip. I think of last week's show on the Balkans. You could easily add days to that trip. Or, in fact, they'll combine multiple different shows, especially now that we have over 900 shows. It's easy to find 2 that are close together and put that into a longer trip. I hope that helps, Steve, and the rest of you who are wondering why we focus on a 1-week itinerary. I'm trying to get in the habit of reminding people that we have a website and what is new on the Amateur Traveler website. There's a recent post on the site, and that's the post about my trip to San Sebastian in Bilbao in the Basque country of Spain. A very enjoyable trip. I think you'll enjoy that read. And with that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And thanks so much for listening.